Welcome to the Navigating My Crazy podcast. I'm Shayla. Navigating My Crazy is a weekly podcast created for moms trying to balance life, family, purpose, and wanting to improve their mental wellness. Our goal is to inspire conversations necessary to end the stigma associated with mental health and the unrealistic societal expectations related to being a mom. But most importantly, to create a community so that no mom ever feels alone as we all navigate this crazy thing called life together. Let's start this show. All right, everyone. So welcome back to the Navigating My Crazy podcast. Today we are joined by Miss Ann Dillard, and I'm so excited to have her here today. Miss Ann is a psychotherapist, educational trainer, and a consultant. She's the president of KIP Consulting Services, LLC, and she's also the founder and chair of Project Safety Nets, Inc. It's Miss Ann's belief that everyone holds the answer to their struggles, and it's her responsibility as a licensed marriage and family therapist to help her clients to embark on those discoveries. She offers a holistic approach to healing. She's also the founder of KIP Consulting Services, so it's her passion to help instill hope and empower people to live their best lives. She offers psychotherapy, educational training, and consulting by sharing skills and strategies that transform minds and lives of her clients. She also enjoys the global component of her work, started a nonprofit organization called Project Safety Nets, where she empowered residents of underserved communities in what part of West Africa?
Senegal, West Africa.
Senegal. So they also did that while fighting against malaria. So over the last 11 years, she's taken many mission trips back to the same region of Africa, as well as participated in relief efforts in other countries. She's partnered with multiple individuals and organizations to provide resources that help bring hope to the people in those developing countries and to save lives. She's also a licensed marriage and family therapist in the state of Georgia and Minnesota. She's been married to her husband, Joseph Dillard, for 31 years. They have 4 wonderful children, and she has 3 beautiful grandchildren. And so she feels the best and most important part of her work is impacting children and families in the communities around the world. I love this. She says, knowledge is power and the possibilities are endless. So I started following Miss Ann about a little over a year or so ago. I had a friend that added me to a group that she has called Building Authentic Mother-Daughter Relationships. And this was important to me at that time because I had been trying to reestablish the relationship with my own mom. And my sister and I had really been talking about the relationship with our daughters because her daughters are entering into those preteen years. And so she shares lots of wonderful information, and the discussions that she has are really on point and key. And I was able to actually join her to be a part of a mother-daughter telesummit over the last week called Let's Talk About It, where there were a host of awesome speakers. And I was a part of a panel speaking from the perspective of a mother with a mental health issue. Thank you, Miss Ann, for joining us, but she just has this huge variety of information that she's able to share.
Excellent. Thank you so much for having me, Shayla. It's been a pleasure watching you, and it was a joy having you on our telesummit last week. And just to be on your show this week is amazing. And thank you. Thank you for what you do. Navigating My Crazy just makes it so plain and easy.
Yes. Just one of the things that, of course, I really got excited. But when I first met you was just the information, the breadth of information that you have about mother-daughter relationships. So what made you really get behind this issue?
When you think about the mother-daughter relationship, first of all, it runs the gamut. It is emotional, it's biological, it's spiritual, it's psychological, it's mental, it's all of that and so much more. I see the mother-daughter relationship as the foundation, the blueprint to our other relationships in life. A little while ago, I started on this journey with 12 women to write this anthology called Unchain My Legacy. And when I thought about what am I going to write about and how can I fix my stuff so that it doesn't pass on to my daughter, or make repairs with my daughter, so it lessens the chances of that passing down another generation. And so in order to be real in this book and in this writing, I had to go back and do my work. And therefore, the authenticity that came forth in the writing was something that I was compelled to live out in real life.
Wow.
That's why the group was started.
So what were some things, and not to steal all the thunder from the book, because of course we want people to read it, but what were some things when you were writing the book and you were reflecting on your own relationship with your daughter that really brought out that you felt like you needed to go in and make sure that it was fixed?
Oh my goodness. We always talk about generational curses. And I don't necessarily like to say generational curses. I like to say generational patterns, because they're just patterns that keep repeating over and over. There is something about saying patterns that compels you to take ownership. If you say curses, it sounds like something that's been passed down and you can't do anything about it. But when you realize the pattern, then you can change a pattern. As I was writing, my chapter is entitled, What I Wish I Knew When I Was 13. And I said to my daughter, I asked her, I got permission to interview her. And I said, what do you wish you knew when you were 13? And she's like, Mom, no, everything is good. It's all good. Yeah. But I know that we have tension in our relationship. She's like, it's all good. I'm like, okay, I'm going to press you a little bit, and it's okay. Just, let's talk about it. It's okay. And she so happened to have her journals, a stack of journals next to her, and she picked one up, and that entry was from when she was 13.
Wow.
It was spiritual to me. And so she started reading about an incident, and I documented that in the chapter. And she's like, Mom, I really wish I knew I had a voice, and I wish I knew my voice was important. And I was like, oh my goodness. That's what I wish I knew when I was 13. I wish I knew I had a voice. I wish I wasn't always told to be quiet, to sit down, to stay out of grown folks' business. I wish I knew that my voice was important. I also wish I knew that my uniqueness was a gift to the world. But being talked about for being dark-skinned, to have a round face, to all of these characteristics about myself being attacked, that propelled me to be suicidal at a young age. And I remember, and I talked about this in my chapter, one day I was over a tank, which is a big open reservoir in the yard. And I announced, I'm like, I'm just going to kill myself then. And then I heard in the background, go ahead, just do it. And I'm glad I didn't.
Right.
Thank God I didn't. Back then people didn't take that stuff seriously. And so that compels me to work now, not only with my own family, but with mothers and daughters, to say, let's take these things seriously, because you were able to endure some stuff and those weren't the choices that you made. It doesn't mean that my experiences should be minimized.
Right.
I've been working through that and working on just giving a different perspective. When we're teenagers, our brains don't have the capacity to deal with the things that we think are life and death situations.
Right.
And as an adult, you might not think it's life and death, right? You might have some ways of coping and you might understand some things differently. But as a teenager, if it feels like life and death, it is life and death.
That's a great point. So as far as the relationship and kind of the dynamic between yourself and your daughter and things that you experience, have you been able to have those same conversations with your mom?
That That's a trifactor. I mean, that's a really good question. I remember my mom, she reached out to me, and I love my mom dearly. I love my mom. And it's not popular to talk about your mom and what your mom didn't do. And you don't talk about your mom. You don't let nobody else talk about your mom.
Absolutely.
My mom had reached out to me, and she wanted to talk. And I was like, ooh, this is it, because I gave her a copy of the book for her. And she never said anything about it. So when she reached out, I was like, okay, now. I felt like 5 years old. So we went out, we did all the little, surfacey stuff. And then she's like, I really want to have a relationship with you. I have a relationship with your sisters, and we're not close. And, it really hurts that you ignore me. And I was like, really? And so we had this conversation, because I was like, okay, who should show up at this table? Should the therapist show up? Should the 5-year-old show up? Should the 14-year-old show up? Or should the 50-year-old show up? So that's a big decision to make. Who should show up? And I think I vacillated between the 13-year-old and the 50-year-old. But I couldn't go in the realm of therapists, because the things that my mom was asking, she wasn't equipped to deal with the answers. So she's like, I do want to have a relationship. So I was like, well, what kind of relationship? She said, a mother-daughter relationship. I said, well, we have one. No. And I said, well, how do you suppose we get that? She said, well, we should just let bygones be bygones. I said, no, I don't think that's how it should work, because I needed some validation and acknowledgement that I went through a lot.
Right.
So needless to say, she was not able to own some of the things that had gone on. And it's not one of the things that, when working with mothers and daughters, one of the things that I have to lay the groundwork for is that, because you admit that you did some stuff that wasn't right, or you didn't know, because you admit that doesn't mean it negates everything else that you did right. It simply does not make you a bad person, but that person needs to be validated that their experience was real. When I shared a couple of experiences with her, she's like, no, that's not how it happened. That's how you think it happened. And then that just kind of shut me down.
Right.
And I said, regardless, those were my experiences. I had to live them. But Shayla, let me say this. This is a constant battle, and I'm trying to be authentic in my relationship with her as well.
Mm-hmm.
So I can't just jump in and just do the song and dance. I have to figure out what feels right and how do I navigate that. Right. So I'm in the process, because I want it to be real. If it's not real, then I don't need to be doing it.
Right.
That kind of stuff is what sends me into maladaptive behaviors like overeating and all that kind of stuff that I've done most of my life. I'm working on that, developing what is real. One of the things when I do have another talk with her is I will share with her. I'm not holding her hostage for the behaviors or what she did that she thought was the best thing to do, because of those experiences. That's what made me who I am. I mourn for the little girl who wasn't taken care of emotionally and physically. She worked hard, and my physical needs were met in that way. But I mourn for the little girl who didn't feel safe most of the time. I mourn for the little girl who still struggles with the name calling and the identity issues and the self-esteem issues and the second guessing. I mourn for that. However, I also celebrate that girl, because through her struggles, I am able to help heal other mother-daughter relationships.
Oh, that's beautiful.
Yeah. So because I'm celebrating, does that mean that I don't want to feel that or that validation? No, I still want to feel that validation. And I also want to have enough grace to say, you did the best that you could.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, my sister and I were just having this conversation the other night, because the last time my mom was here, my mom lives in Washington State. We live in Louisiana. And so we had planned to have this meeting with her, and we were going to sit down on my patio and have this discussion. And I'm glad we didn't, because like you said, you really have to be cognizant of how you're coming into that conversation. Although my mom and I had been talking, my sister and she had not. And my mom was not ready to receive that at that time. And so I'm glad the conversation didn't happen. And I actually spoke to my mom after we did the telesummit and let her know that we were going to have like this talk that never transpired. But looking back, I'm glad it didn't happen, because I don't think it would have been productive, because she wouldn't have come in ready to receive, and then my sister would have come in ready to give, and then it just wouldn't have been the outcome that we were looking for. And I think me being in the middle and kind of having these prep talks, when we actually do have them, they'll come out better. Yes. Just because my mom has been open more to understanding that the bad doesn't negate the good, but what some of those things actually did to us as far as us internalizing some of the things that happened. So yeah, it's a very delicate dance, and unfortunately it's not one that you've done before. So a lot of times you're stepping on toes that really hurt. They really, really hurt.
And that is so key, because any parts, in therapy we call it parts, any part of you can show up in that conversation, and replaying it in your mind and deciding which is the healthiest part that can represent you at the table. It's like you holding court with yourself and all those parts that's going on.
Right.
Now, who's going to represent us? Because it's not healthy. It's not useful. And you actually back somebody in the corner when you just come out. And so that's why it was important for me to set a time and a date with my daughter. I didn't want to hijack her or throw something in a conversation that kind of sideswiped her into this. So respecting that person's space, that they might not be ready to deal with that or face those things right now, is really, really important. And if they're not able, like my mother wasn't able to own her part of it, if they're not able to also have that conversation with yourself, what is it, first of all, that I need? And what I need is, I just needed validation that, yes, these things happen. Yes, I was totally distracted. Yes, I didn't have the skills to deal with all the stuff that was going on. So identifying what it is that you need. And if you don't get it, what does that mean for you? Because she might never be able to give that to me. So how will that change who I am? Or what other ways can I find to meet that besides some maladaptive ways of overeating? Or overeating is my vice, and that's why I keep going back to that.
Mine too.
Right? Nothing like comfort food.
Absolutely.
Feel like, okay, I can eat this and it feel like this, and totally psychological.
So what are some... Now you have to change hats from daughter to professional. So for those whose moms aren't open to receive, or those whose moms have passed on and they can't have those conversations, what advice do you give to women that may, as they get older, realize that these things are bothering them, or these are the things that are causing issues like overeating, issues like drugs, different things that show up as we get older from these trauma experiences that happen? What advice do you give women that may feel like they're stuck in their 5-year-old or 10-year-old or 15-year-old self?
That's a really good question, and it's a very complicated process. And I take women through different ways of dealing with it. For instance, having them do that process, and I'm in the process of writing a journal to help women go through this particular thing. Even having the conversation again as, what is it that you want? And if they're not able to give it to you, how will that impact you? If they're not able to give it to you, can you get that from somewhere else? Is there somebody else that can give you that surrogacy that, you need from a mother to feel validated, right? And if they do give it to you, how will that change your life? And once you are able to answer those questions, and if mom is still not able to give it to you, let's find other ways for you to get to that part in life that you want without that validation. And sometimes, in the case of, okay, my mom is mentally ill now, she's absent, she doesn't have the capacity to deal with this, I have a lot of people in my discussion circle, because we've been going around talking about the book. A lot of people who may have moms who are experiencing dementia, or moms who have passed on through death, and they don't have the capacity to heal that 9-year-old or that 6-year-old or that 5-year-old. And so having them go through different therapeutic modalities, like talking to the chair, using chair therapy, therapeutic modality called Gestalt. So I use that with my clients, where they switch off roles. They're in one chair and they play the role of the mother, in the other chair and they play the role of their self, which at whatever age they want that, and they go back and forth and have this dialogue. And some of that also in therapy look like writing a letter and just having a way to release it. We have burning ceremonies and different things like that, or even balloon release, but doing something physical to say, I have reconciled this and this is what I'm going to do to move on.
Right. But do you think people are able to truly move on? Like, is that a realistic goal?
I think if they do the work, it's realistic. Yeah. Again, trust, the mother-daughter relationship is the blueprint of your other relationships.
Right.
And I think once you become aware of those different parts, and when I say those different parts, a lot of times it's where that significant trauma has happened in your life. Mine, very significant part for me was 13. And so a lot of times I will respond to things from my 13-year-old immature part. And I think when you bring that awareness, women can then start to say, okay, Ann, who's showing up? Who was that? What is it that you needed? Right? You're talking, and you can talk to that part, because when I was sitting at that table with my mother, this is where the therapist side came up, where I had to say to myself, okay, 13-year-old, you are valuable. You're important. I got you. I'm not going to let you be violated again. And that's why I stood up to her and said, no, we can't just go on. We have to admit. And that 13-year-old needed to be validated that these things did happen.
That's powerful. There's hope. So there's hope. That's what I was reaching for. There is hope.
And it's just about the awareness, I believe. About the aware. And once you have that awareness, you can know who's operating and who's representing the committee.
And so one of the things, I recently had an interview with Dr. Christy Holloway.
Yes.
And she was on one of your telesummits. And one of the things she talked about was really making sure that when you're seeking treatment, that you are able to vocalize what you're looking for so that you're able to get the right person to work with. So if someone was having these issues, what type of therapist or what type of counselor or psychotherapy, like what should they be looking for when they're seeking help?
Yes, that's a really good question. Interviewing different therapists to make sure that it's a good fit. Different people use different modalities. First of all, if it's a therapist that's going to tell you get over it, that's not a good fit, because you want to be able to explore, you want to be able to understand some of the things that's going on. Because for me, when my clients sit in front of me, I find it validating to them when they say, well, sometimes I act like this, and I help them to identify what part of them and how old was that, and we trace back to find that there were significant traumas that happened at that age. And so that part of the brain, it affects the trajectory of your brain development. And then that part of the brain, is triggered, and certain things will bring you back to that age and bring you to acting from that hurt place.
Right.
So having a therapist who understands different things like that about healing that trauma and what happens in the body and things like that is really important.
Absolutely.
They have different kinds of modalities. They have EMDR. That's one way to deal with extensive trauma. And there's so many different modalities. The best advice I could give is to have somebody who you're truly connected to and who understands your journey.
Right. Because I think in the African American community, where help is just recently being something that people are even open to talk about, I think the most overwhelming part, and I can say for myself, was looking at therapists and counselors and this person and, okay, who do I pick? How do I decide what to pick? And then if you're deciding on someone and you don't feel like you're getting anywhere, then what I did personally was internalize it. Well, I'm just broke. I can't be fixed because I'm not getting anything out of this session because I was not connected to the therapist that I was working with. And so it was a distraction for the most part because I didn't get anything out of it. So I thought it was me and I didn't move forward. And I think I was in my early 20s. I went to therapy initially and I got nothing out of it. And so it wasn't until I found myself going back into a dark place. Well, I checked myself into a mental hospital, and that's really was able to connect with a therapist that understood where I was coming from, was able to break it down for me to understand. That's why I always ask, well, what should someone look for? Certain criteria that they have, certain things that they offer, do different therapists work on trauma, just wanting to make sure that, the listeners or when people are looking for therapy or seeking the help that we always tell them to seek, they know what to seek.
Yes. And I think that's really important. Different people have different niche
Mm-hmm.
and work to be more educated and more competent within that niche.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's really important to interview your therapist and, just like, if you go to a doctor and it's not you can tell if it's a good fit. If that doctor coming in that room and rushing through and ask me the same thing 20 million times and feel like that doctor is not listening, I am more likely going to choose a different doctor.
Okay.
So it's okay to interview your therapist, but I understand that because you're going to a licensed clinician, you might feel like, I don't know enough. Maybe this is how it's supposed to. But I want to encourage your listeners to, even though you might be going in there feeling broken or feeling emotionally distraught, trust yourself. Trust yourself that you're going to seek the right care for you. And if it doesn't feel good, chances are it's not.
Right.
So trust that we are born with intuition, especially as women. And a lot of times so much has happened in our life that silence our intuition. When you start feeling that, it doesn't feel good, something is a little weird, something is a little off, trust that.
That's good advice. Great advice.
Yeah, trust that. And even when we're seeking help for our children, also trust that. And we think that because you might think because you're not the professional, you don't know. But I think that you trust that and find out the credentials and find out how they've worked with people and ask for a treatment plan. What's the course of treatment for me?
Just another question. We were talking, of course, about mother and daughter relationships. Once you realize that, you have this trauma and you see yourself passing it on, like, what's advice would you give to a mom that realizes, like you were saying, that you're silencing your 13-year-old? What's some advice that you would give to a mom that finds herself in that situation? I have a 13-year-old. I was silenced. I'm doing the same thing because that's what was done to me. What advice would you give to a mom that's in that situation right at that time?
Yeah, I would say, and this is from what I've learned from my daughter, and thank God she had extended me a lot of grace. I would say when you realize if that's not what you want for your life, it's okay to admit that what you did or what you said was not okay. One of our colleagues, Mercedes Zamudio, she has a book called Shame-Free Parenting. And she talks about how you course correct. You're driving down the wrong road or you miss a turn and things like that. You don't just throw everything in and throw the towel in and just go home or sell the car because it didn't take you in the right place. You course correct and get back on track. And if you don't know how to get back on track, there are professionals who can help you. But it takes a level of vulnerability, which is really important when it comes to parenting, to say, you know what, I did that incorrectly, or that wasn't the best choice for me to make. And here is what I want to do differently.
That's good. And I like that example of the car. And what I thought was to take it a step further. If you find yourself going down the wrong road, you wouldn't continue to go down the wrong road if you know you're not heading in the right direction. So turn around and get the right direction so that you can get to where you're going, or to, create that relationship with your daughter that you want to create. Just don't stick on the wrong path just because you're already going down it.
Yeah, and the healing, it takes vulnerability to turn. It takes vulnerability to course correct. And that's where the healing and that's where the authenticity is developed. Because you're also in that, you're teaching your daughter, mom's not perfect. But a lot of times as parents, we try to hold up this persona that I should know how to do everything perfectly. But the reality is, as a mom, sometimes it gets pretty scary.
Absolutely.
Yes. And it doesn't hurt to show that to our daughters because, like my daughter told me, it gives her permission to not have to be a perfectionist. It gives her permission to mess up sometimes. More risk.
That's good. So tell us more about this book that you were talking about earlier.
Oh my goodness. It's an amazing book. Amazon #1 bestseller, Unchain My Legacy. The visionary author is Audra R. Upchurch. It's talking about owning our choices. There are 12 stories in here. Mine is #1. We have 12 different authors, all women of color, who wrote about their experiences. It runs the gamut from molestation to all different kinds of violation, spousal abuse, just different things that we've put our children in and doing that course correcting. That's what it's about, unchaining your legacy so that you own your choices so that it'll create a different legacy. And they have another one coming up in the trilogy. It's called Unchain Me Mama, The Forgiveness Factor. And I wrote the foreword for that book as well. So that'll be coming out this summer.
Oh, wow. That sounds exciting. I'll have to get both of the books. And I also put the link to the book in the show notes so that everybody can get it. So tell us what you are up to. What do you have going on? Let everybody know how they can reach you and get with Miss Ann.
I am so excited that the telesummit was such a success.
Yes.
And so that's going to be coming out in a library soon of resources so people have that at their fingertips. And I continue to be on Teen Talk Live on Monday nights on Facebook at 8 o'clock Eastern Standard Time. Also, I conduct healthy relationship workshops, telehealth, video health psychotherapy sessions for people in Minnesota and in the Georgia area. I'm licensed in both those states. And I continue to do my global work in Senegal, West Africa. And so we're getting our next missions team ready for the mission field.
Wow. One of these days, I'm going to join that mission team.
Hey.
I was just reading about it and seeing some of the pictures, and it was just so inspiring, the work that you do. And then it just makes us realize that the world is so much bigger than our four walls or our little towns or our state, even our country. It's just so many people that need help. And if we have the ability to do so, do it. So it's just so inspiring. And I appreciate you and thank you so much. I have just been able to connect with the most wonderful, empowering women that are willing to say, I made mistakes and this is what I'm doing to fix it. And this is how I'm getting better. And no, I'm not perfect, because of course we expect for the therapist to have perfect kids, to do things correctly. And so just hearing you open up about your relationship with your daughter and your relationship with your mom and how they're both still works in progress, it's inspiring, because you're not perfect. You're a work in progress. Even with the letters and the knowledge that you have, we still have work to do. Everyone does.
And that is so well said, because, I even tell my kids, no, my daughter said, Mom, you're supposed to know that you're the relationship. You know what? Yeah. And I get little bouts of sanity where I can reflect and admit that what I'm doing isn't right and I need help. So
right.
Yeah, that's what makes me effective as a therapist.
That's powerful. That's so powerful. And I love you for that. All right. Well, Miss Ann, thank you so much for joining everyone. Give everybody your social media information so that they can follow you.
Awesome. Again, my name is Ann Dillard. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist, and you can find me on all social media platforms at anndillard.lmft or on my website at www.anndillard.com.
All right. Thank you so much. And thank everyone for listening. Have a great day.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for listening to the Navigating My Crazy podcast. Don't forget to send all of your questions to questions with an S at navigatingmycrazy.com, or you can complete the form on our website at navigatingmycrazy.com/contact. Also, join the community and chime in on the conversations by liking and following Navigating My Crazy on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. Subscribe and rate us 5 stars on iTunes or your favorite podcasting platform. Moms, have a great week and get ready for our next Talk It Out Tuesday.